You ready? All right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is your old buddy Chewie, and I am back this evening with my best brother in the world and fellow 406 North Lane godfather, the one and only Pip. How are you, sir?
Good, doing really good. Excited to finally be a part of one of these very exciting up-and-coming vlogs that we have going on here.
So just a little bit of kind of backstory here. Again, Matt, and I lived together for the better part of our days in Bloomington. We lived first in the dorms of Teeter Thompson 5, and then we moved out to 406 North Lane, where we lived for a couple of years on North Lane as well. And so we have been kind of threatening to do a podcast or a vlog or what have you for what seems like 5 or 6 years now.
Right.
Every time we get together, we talk about how we're going to do it, and we never get around to doing it. And so I started doing this kind of rambling nonsense during COVID here, and we've been trying to find an opportunity to get Pip on. And I think we finally found it. So a couple episodes ago, I kind of randomly on a late evening, I poured myself a drink. Cheers. And I started rambling about my all-time the Mount Rushmore of professional wrestlers. And again, that was not planned. It just sort of happened. And the first comment, I got a text the next morning, and I believe the text was, "Oh, you bastard! You did Mount Rushmore." And so we thought this would be a good opportunity for Pip to get on and make his first of hopefully many appearances here on the podcast or the blog, and so he could kind of offer his rebuttal to my top 5 lists. So anything you want to say before we get started?
Yeah, I mean, actually, first of all, thank you for having me on your vlog. I'm very proud and honored to say that I'm, for those who don't know me, I am an official 406 North Lane alumni. So I feel, like I have at least a little bit of ownership over the branding that is the 406 North Lane. You and I started working on the website a long time ago, which is your website, and you've done all the work. I contributed a few things here and there, but I've always been following it and very excited to contribute to it whenever I had the opportunity. So yeah, it's we've been threatening to do this for a long time on all of the many topics that we both love very much, and this is a special one for me because it goes back to the day where you and I would probably drive slightly hungover to the video store on College and go pick up 5 wrestling movies for 5 days for $5, and we would just sit in our room and not do homework and not write papers and things, and we would watch old WrestleManias and Royal Rumbles and Survivor Series, and it's just one of the many bonding points that we have. So obviously when you put this blog or your vlog out, it was something that I saw, and I'm like, well, I can't be silent on this. This is by no means a rebuttal, but more so an addendum or just my shameless attempt to get in front of your audience and say, hey, what about me? I like wrestling too. So nobody else returned my call, so this is how we have it set up.
Yes, so for those of you who don't know, if you've ever been following on the website for the past decade and a half or so, every year for WrestleMania, we do a pyramid, and we do a drinking game because we get together every year and we watch WrestleMania. This year, obviously, we didn't due to COVID concerns, but we did exactly what we're doing right now. We got together on Zoom. We got together with my brother, and we sat there for 2 glorious nights, and we watched WrestleMania together. And we built our pyramid, and it was glorious, and it was weird, and but it was an opportunity for us to still kind of hang out. So
Yep.
So anyways, so let's see, if you recall, the kind of list that I came up with was a list of overall best performers in WWF/WWE history.
Right.
So it wasn't necessarily the best in-ring performer. It wasn't necessarily the best promo. It wasn't necessarily the best character. It was kind of all around. And so part of the reason that I kind of got on that topic was I had watched the Last Ride documentary on WWE Network about the Undertaker, and for kind of forever the Undertaker has been kind of my number one.
Right.
And so I kind of went into that list. So so I know that there's a couple overlaps on our top 5 list. So we'll go with the 2 that are consistent first. And then we'll give Pip an opportunity to rebuke my other 3 or to add his 3 to mine. How's that?
Yeah, let's do it.
So the first one that I know that there was an overlap is the master of the Stone Cold Stunner, Stone Cold Steve Austin. Again, for me, he was everything that the Attitude Era was all about in WWE. So I had my thoughts. Take it away.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't possibly argue with that. I think, and I guess maybe slight spoiler alert, like he's going to be the newest guy on my list just because, of my reverence for the old legendary days of WWF yore. But he's absolutely on there because I think, and you'll see a bit of a trend with the people that I picked on this list. Almost every one of them, in fact, every one of them to a T, does the face and the heel roles very, very well. Like they were both fantastic faces and fantastic heels. And Austin was not only that, but he sort of played everywhere in the middle too. It didn't really matter whether he was the face or the heel. Everybody really loved him. And he had, the most incredible charisma, I think, of all of his peers. And I mean, the Stone Cold Stunner, I mean, how can you beat that? Like that is just one of the coolest badass finishing moves that he found a way to put pretty much everybody, through that at one point or another. And what he did for the business was just absolutely incredible. And if anything, I'm regretful that I missed a lot of his heyday, and I've seen it all to some degree, but I wasn't really big into wrestling at that time, so I didn't see it. But from top to bottom, he was fantastic. I think he was the best of his entire group in that era for sure.
Yeah, one of the years ago, I don't know if you remember this, we were sitting, I think we were sitting in a BW3, and we were talking.
Which means we were drinking, so no, I probably don't remember this.
So we were talking about potential lists that we would do if we ever did a podcast, right?
Actually, now I do, actually.
Right? And one of the lists that I'll tell you exactly when this was. This was WrestleMania 30. When it was, and what we did to pregame building the pyramid was go and drink beer.
Yeah, right. Okay. Yeah, that sounds like it's up our alley.
But one of the things that we had on that list was the best finisher, right? And the Stunner has got to be on that list because it's a finisher.
Absolutely.
Any guy, regardless of size, it comes out of nowhere.
It looks like it legitimately breaks your neck.
The son of a bitch, right?
Yeah. So absolutely, one of the, in fact, probably from my list, if I'm looking at it, my second favorite finisher off of my top 5 list for sure.
I know what your favorite finisher is.
You know what my favorite is. There's no doubt about it.
Okay.
We'll get there.
So we got Stone Cold. Next up, this is the last one that there is overlap, was the Macho Man Randy Savage.
Correct.
And kind of as I talked through my list, again, I've always said that Taker was my favorite, and I still think that's the case. But I think I think Macho Man is probably the best all-around performer. It might not be my favorite, but I mean, when you put what he could do in the ring and the way he talked and the pomp and circumstance and Savage was absolutely amazing, and the fact that we lost him so early just really just sucks.
Absolutely. I mean, in fact, I think It's going to be a real tough one to say between him and one of the other guys on my list, my absolute favorite of all time, because there just was nothing wrong about anything that he did. He was the perfect combination of out of the ring charisma with in the ring talent and technician work that he did. It was just amazing. He was one of the few people, like back in the days, you'll see wrestling documentaries, a lot of wrestlers had managers put with them because they needed mouthpieces, and it was sort of the opposite with Savage. He was his own mouthpiece. He didn't need any help there, but he had sort of the eye candy aspect of it. And Elizabeth obviously was a highly underrated part of his entire presentation, although I think everybody gave her, certainly the props that were due. But I mean, nobody. I'll go ahead and say this. I don't think anybody in the history of the WWE, from my perspective, takes a bump like Randy Savage. I mean, the guy he just looked like he got used and abused. And he could sell anything. His finisher was good. It was fine. It was dramatic and had a lot of flair to it, so it was cool. But my favorite signature move of all time was the one where he used to take a guy by the back of the head like he was going to do a bulldog, and he'd run and he jumped over the top rope and brought them down on the top rope, and the guy would flip up, and DiBiase would sell that better than anybody, right? And they just fly back, and he didn't use that forever. But no, I mean, Macho Man, absolutely, there was nothing wrong with anything he ever did. Like, he was perfect. He was honestly one of the most energetic and the most fun wrestlers, and he was the most feared as a heel. He was great. He was fantastic. He's probably my absolute favorite of all time.
I think very close. If we ever sit down and do one of these where we do the best matches of all time, it would be impossible to do, but maybe we could do Mania matches. I gotta think that him and Steamboat at WrestleMania 3 is the best WrestleMania match of all time, or it's got to be on that list, right?
For sure. I think that's, for wrestling fans, that is a widely known one of the best matches of all time, and one of my personal vindications, or I don't know if vindications is the right word, but one of the things that helped make me feel like I was a qualified wrestling fan back in the day is, like, I've always felt that since the first time I ever saw that match. I thought it was one of the greatest matches I ever saw. And then it just became sort of this part of the lore of WrestleMania 3. Like, that was just one of the greatest matches. And I 100% agree. It was so good. And it was because of Savage. Like, Steamboat was fantastic. I can't take anything away from him. But Randy Savage is the reason that match was as amazing as it was. And
yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the other things that they certainly don't do today that they did back then was, I mean, that the build to that match was what, 8 months, 9 months? Yeah. Like, it was long, right?
Right.
Savage,
and then the Hogan stuff. I mean, the Hogan stuff that went through. I mean, it was a big chance by Vince that he took to put the belt on him at 4. And then, because Hogan was doing other things, and then they obviously, turned him heel to give it back to Hogan. But I mean, he was such a good bad guy. I mean, that whole, I mean, nobody talks about that as much anymore, but the whole heel run that he did when him and Hogan were breaking up and Elizabeth was in the middle, and, Savage got thrown out of the ring and knocked out Elizabeth during that. I think it was a Saturday Night's Main Event or something like that. I mean, it was legitimate heat that you felt coming from that rivalry and from that match. And again, that's all Savage. Like, he carried that. Like, Hogan is Hogan, but he needs somebody to kind of to work with. And Savage could work with anybody. I mean, anybody.
I agree. And I'll tell you what kind of solidified Savage on my list. I went back and I watched the Wrestling Classic, which is like one of the second oldest pay-per-views on the network, and Savage works like 5 times that night, and it's just they're shit matches, right? It's just it's him against Greg Valentine or Dino Brown. They're short, couple 5-minute matches, but even in those, he's just amazing. So
for me, it was WrestleMania 8 because he was towards the end of his in-ring career with the WWE at that point, and he beats Flair for the title in Indianapolis at WrestleMania 8.
That's right.
It was a really good match.
Match,
he played it fantastically. He made the Warrior look good at WrestleMania. He was selling
the leg really bad, right? He was wearing those gold tights.
Yeah.
That was.
But he won the title. Like, I think people sometimes forget. Like, he won the title from Flair that night.
Yeah.
He wasn't just a one-time title holder. He made the Warrior look good the year before at WrestleMania 7. I mean, he could do it all. He really could. Yeah. And it's a tragedy that not only is he gone, but he didn't have more in-ring time with the WWE and kind of got lost in the whole mayhem of what became WCW at that time.
Yeah. So, all right. Okay. So we've got Stone Cold and Macho, and I think this is where our lists are gonna kind of go our separate ways. So my next one up was Hulk Hogan. Hogan, for me, I'll admit I'm a mark, right? I love that Real American. I don't think it would ever be on the list of one of the best matches, but like him and Slaughter at WrestleMania 7, was it?
Yeah.
Is one of those matches that I just really, really enjoy watching. I enjoy watching him Hulk up. I enjoy watching specifically in that match. He's got blood all over his face, and Adnan comes in and he takes the flag, and I'm a dork. But yeah, and then him against Warrior at WrestleMania 6 was amazing, right?
For sure.
So I'm gonna try to guess your three. Okay.
All right, you'll get two of them for sure. The other one you may not get.
Okay, so Warrior's got to be one of them, right? Ultimate Warrior.
Actually, no.
Oh my God. Okay,
no.
All right. I thought for sure Warrior would be one of them. Okay, take another guess then.
Okay.
Jake Roberts has got to be one of them.
Of course. Jake is my next one in line. Jake had. For me, I don't know what I was just so drawn to him. I think he had one. His story in general is just really, really interesting to me. He did a DVD with the WWF a long time ago that was really in depth on his life and what happened to him, and going back to a really, really abusive childhood, sexually, physically, all kinds of really crazy, messed up stuff. And to think that he came out of that even somewhat normal is pretty amazing. And the story about just, I think he was the first one that I really heard the entire behind the scenes story on his drug use and everything like that. But I loved him in every other way too. Like in the ring, I thought he was fantastic. He was very purposeful with everything that he did. He was very deliberate with everything that he did, and he was calculated, and he was smart. Like, I don't know if the guy could go out and get a good score on an SAT, but the guy knew how to work a match, and he knew how to do the psychology of the match within the ring as it was going on. And he showed that, and I immediately respected that. But outside the ring, he talked a really good game as well. And, he had his own talk show when it wasn't, when there weren't a lot of people who did that at the time. And for me, I don't think there's a better finisher that has ever existed in the history of wrestling than the DDT. It just hasn't. And the fact that he created it on a friggin' accident is just amazing. Like, the story behind that, which has been told many times, is a classic one. He basically just had some guy in a headlock, and he tripped and fell, and he dropped on it, and it just sort of became that epiphany that it just kind of hit him. But he also has one of my, I told you about Savage's signature move where he takes the guy and jumps over the rope. My favorite signature move is Jake the Snake when he does that short arm clothesline, nobody else does. But the DDT, like, nobody ever got up from that, with the exception, the only person that I can ever think of that ever kicked out of that was the Undertaker at WrestleMania 8. He kicked out at 2 of them, which is great because they were building the Undertaker, and that makes sense. But I mean, nobody kicked out of that DDT ever, and that was just classic. So yeah, I mean, I love Jake. I think he's the perfect mix of the out of the ring psychology with the in ring talent, and just overall just friggin' cool.
Yeah,
I just love him.
Jake, even before Jake kind of went through his yoga resurgence and got clean and this, that, and the other thing, Jake was a super compelling character. I agree. I mean, the promos that Jake Roberts would give, where he would just kind of stare into the camera and just be like speaking to your soul, right? And he was quiet, and he was deliberate with what he was saying.
For sure.
I actually, ironically enough, I just watched the match the other night where he DDT'd Steamboat on the concrete.
Dude, that gives me the chills.
Good God. I mean, like Steamboat's not selling. He's legit like knocked out because Jake dropped him on his head.
Because he can't pick him up.
Yeah, and he
like wasn't strong enough to pick him up.
Yeah. But it's scary. I tell you, that's one of the things that really, obviously wrestling today is not even the same sport as it was 30 years ago. That one today, though, still bums me out that there is 35 DDTs in every match, and it's just not the finisher that it was.
They watered it down. Nobody does it like Jake. It doesn't look right. Like, I hate it. My biggest pet peeve in wrestling, period, is when someone DDTs him and then they flip over, like they do a complete flip.
Right.
Like, when Jake DDTs someone, people lay flat, right? Like, it's just like, it's almost like it legitimately knocked them out and made them unconscious. And the fact that people just sort of like nowadays, they kind of flip around and make it more of a caricature. It bums me out. I agree with you. It took away from some of the power of that.
Okay, so my next one was Ric Flair. Flair, to me.
Before you go there, I want to comment on Hogan, because I feel like your Hogan is a perfectly legit pick. And it was a really strong consideration for me because I respect what Hogan did for the brand of the WWE. Like, Vince built it, but he put Hogan's face all over it. And he deserves all the credit for that. I think for Hogan, my biggest thing is that as a wrestling fan in the legend era of the WWE, they just stuck with his gimmick too long. Like, the Real American thing, it definitely run its course, especially by the time it got to WrestleMania 7, because, you kind of felt like at WrestleMania 6 when the Warrior beat him, that the Warrior was the new thing. Like, he was the next guy. He was the one that they were going to build their flagship on. And if you know anything about the WWE, you know why that didn't happen. But at the same time, it's like going back to the well with Hogan kind of got repetitive, and they did it at 7, and they did it at 8, and then they did it at 9, and then it just got to the point where they never had the balls to turn him heel. And then when they did finally in the WCW, it became, the next the version 2.0 of Hogan, which was gigantic, and it was the best thing they could have done. They just did it like 5 or 7 years too late. But I honestly, I struggled with that one a little bit. I was going to put that in there too, because as much as I don't really think Hogan is a good wrestler on any level, when that music hits, like, he deserves the pop that he gets, and he gets it from me too, because I'm like, I love to see that happen. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, so there was very few WrestleManias in the last 20 years that we have not watched together.
Yes.
The one that we didn't watch together was WrestleMania. It was Hogan and The Rock. Which WrestleMania was that?
That was 19, right?
19. We did not watch that one together.
Right.
Or I don't know, maybe that was the last one before, like maybe that was right before we started getting together.
I think that was right before. We started watching early 20s, I believe.
So I watched that match, and I remember, you know what, you're right, because I was living in Washington at the time. I remember watching that match, and so if you recall, Hogan was a heel coming into that match, and Rocky was the face. And that was at the Sky Dome, which of course is where Hogan and Warrior went at it. And I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it. That match, when Hogan came out, that crowd went fucking apeshit.
Ballistic.
And then throughout the match, like, no matter what happened, they were cheering Hogan.
They were
going to make him face no matter what.
Right.
It was just, I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it. It was amazing. And again, even at that point, and again, this is pre-WCW, was it? No,
that was when they came back. That was after.
You're right. That was after. But he's clearly way past his prime, and Rock is, can run circles around him physically,
sure.
but Hogan could still bring it. Yeah. So
absolutely.
Okay. Are we done with Hogan?
Yeah. Good.
Okay. All right. So my next on the list was Ric Flair. Ric Flair, and again, there's probably a little bit of overlap for me because I loved him in WCW, but even what he did in WWE, WWF, when he came in, they had the angle where he brought the big gold belt with him, and there was a whole storyline where apparently he was with Miss Elizabeth, and they had pictures with them, and this whole thing was savage. I mean, and he won the Royal Rumble to win the title. to hear Bobby the Brain Heenan, which we'll have to do that list at one point, the best managers of all time.
Jeez.
To hear Bobby Heenan in the Rumble saying, "It's not fair to Flair. It's not," he was just going crazy. And I just, Flair to me was, he's the 16-time world champ. He's the OG. And just, I know he obviously didn't get a lot of horseman play in the WWF. But the promos that guy could cut, and not to mention the fact that he could just go, he's like I said, he's one of the best.
Oh, for sure. And it was, that was another one. It was like, I can't disagree with it. Like he's
right.
And my list isn't necessarily the best. It's really more my favorite, right?
Yeah.
So I think Flair, the reason he doesn't end up on my list specifically is just because he didn't spend a lot of time in the WWE, and I didn't watch a lot of stuff out. But if there was anybody that I knew who was a wrestler outside the WWE, it was Flair. It was Ric Flair. Like he transcended, wrestling celebrity in a way that didn't consider the boundaries of WWE versus WCW versus, NWA versus whatever. Like everybody knew who Ric Flair was, kind of like Dusty Rhodes and things like that. For me though, the next one on my list, I think you'll guess this one. I don't know. I didn't let you go through and guess the rest of them, but this one for me is Roddy Piper.
Piper. Okay.
Piper is one of my favorites, which is ironic because Piper is easily the worst effing wrestler on this entire list, right? Like he's not a wrestler. That's not his style, and that's not a dig on Piper because I love Piper. He's one of my absolute favorites of all time. I just think that, but he's a brawler, right? Like that's his style. Like he just gets in there and he's got nothing but full energy. He can do an atomic drop and maybe a body slam, but that's probably the limit of what he can, and a sleeper hold, of course.
Yep.
But Roddy Piper just had the most infectious energy of anybody that I've ever known. And I think the thing that tipped the scale realistically for me, and you're gonna remember this, but it's gonna sound really kind of stupid. It was after he died. You and I were at a Horror Hound convention where we were standing in line, getting ready to get our picture taken with a certain individual from Big Trouble in Little China, and which is, of course, hey, there's a vlog for you waiting to happen. We were talking to some girl, and she was talking about how I don't remember how Piper came up, but she was at another horror convention because obviously he was in the movie They Live, John Carpenter's movie, and he, was no stranger to those conventions. And she was talking about him. She's like, he was the nicest guy in the world. Like he would walk up to people and he would shake their hands and he would ask them how their families were. Like, how's your family? And these are complete strangers. Like he doesn't know these people, but he's just being incredibly kind and incredibly accommodating to all these people who just love him for being an actor and being a wrestler. Yeah. And that probably shouldn't be the reason he's on this list, but it is. He's just fantastic. He was a great heel. He was a great good guy. The best match he ever had was Bret Hart, and that's because Bret Hart was Bret Hart. And that was at WrestleMania 8. Ironically, that WrestleMania has come up more than any other one, and that wasn't a very good one. But I mean, I love Piper. The charisma is unmatched in my book, and he was just fantastic. I just love him.
I tell you that when obviously we have lost a lot of wrestlers over the last decade or so, way too early, right? That could be another show.
Right.
That one and Macho are the two that really, really hurt, right? I was, I was like, oh God, Savage or Piper. That one just really hurt. I agree. I mean, I was a huge Piper mark. I was bummed that dude never got a title, as far as I know, in the WWF.
Intercontinental.
You're right. Never got a
That's
world.
the one he lost to Bret at WrestleMania 8.
That's right.
So yeah.
Which was a great match, right? That was the one where you had him as sleeper and Hart flipped him over into the pin, right?
Yeah. Exactly. Hart ran up to the turnbuckle and ran up the turnbuckle while he was in a sleeper hold and managed to flip it back and then held his shoulder. I'd never seen that move to this day, and before or after, and it was fantastic.
Yeah, and and I come back to the backyard back lot brawl at
With Goldust.
against
Oh,
Goldust. Yeah. So okay. So you got Stone Cold, Macho, Jake, and Piper. I got Stone Cold, Macho, Hogan, and Flair. My last one was the Undertaker. Taker for me was he is professional wrestling, right? He is the he's 30 plus years in at this point. He is somebody who has always been, quote, in character. He never breaks character. He's always the Undertaker. He's not just Mark Calloway. He has changed his persona throughout the years. He's had different theme musics. He's had different versions of the Undertaker. You know, we've gone from the Undertaker to the Underbiker to the American Badass to the demonic one. And, you know, I've been saying for probably 10 years at this point that he probably should just retire. He's beyond. But I'll tell you, his match this year at WrestleMania was pretty fucking good. I mean, it was
good. You're right.
Right? I mean,
he gets all the credit for that, for sure.
You know, it was essentially a horror movie. And before I forget, so in addition to being an OG 406 North Laner, Pip is also the co-founder of ScareTissue.com, which is another passion of ours.
Right.
You know, just another reason why I love this man. So, but yeah, so that Taker and AJ match this year was essentially a horror movie, right? And it was, and it did a good job of kind of hiding Taker, what he can and can't do in the ring. But again, yeah, for me, one quick thing before you get to your last one. So my brother Mark, who always watches WrestleMania with us, for years in our old house had a full-size, life-size Undertaker stand-up, you know, in his room, 6'10" tall. And my mother tells the story to this day about how she would walk into his room and that would scare the shit out of her because just the silhouette of this 6'10" dead man in Mark's room. So
that's fair.
Okay. I have a feeling that we've touched on your last one already. I thought it was Warrior. But I have a feeling we were just talking about him a couple minutes ago. So I'll let you say who it was.
Well, you might be right, but yeah, Undertaker's a really hard one to argue with. In fact, you know, the more you talk, the more you could probably convince me that I need to put him in place of this next guy. But the last guy for me it's Bret Hart. It's Bret the Hitman Hart. Absolute master technician. I don't think I've ever seen a better technician in the ring than Bret the Hitman Hart, and I don't think you can give anybody any more credit than that, because the idea is to skillfully entertain the crowd without necessarily exposing the secret behind the curtain and things like that. And I just think that he did everything that he did it as hard as he could. He did it with as much discipline and as much training as he had to offer. And, you know, I mentioned earlier that I felt like nobody took a bump better than Macho Man. If it's anybody, it's Bret Hart, because that dude, I remember there was at least once a match, he would do this thing where he'd get whipped to the turnbuckle, but he'd go chest first instead of back first. And every time I saw it, like, I felt like the ring moved 3 inches, and it crushed me. Like, I was like, wow, that guy is, you know, he really sells it like that. But he's another one, again, like everybody else on my list, who played a fantastic heel alongside, a really, really good face. I think he's probably a better heel than a face, to be honest, because
I'd agree.
maybe not. It's sort of akin to his actual personality. I don't know, but he was fantastic, and he had so many good years and so many good rivalries with, whether it was Shawn Michaels or whether it was whoever, Stone Cold. I mean, he had so many good matches, and I don't know if I've liked everything that I've heard from him outside of the ring. And he seems like he's kind of bummed about a lot of things and bitter about some stuff, and probably rightfully so in a lot of ways. But excuse me, the work that he did in the ring was it's incomparable. I mean, he made it look easy. He's the kind of guy that made someone like me think, oh, I could do that, even though there's no way anybody thinks that I could do any of that. I couldn't even be Miss Elizabeth, outside the ring and just hold the ropes for Randy Savage, Elizabeth. But no, I think he was fantastic. He was amazing, top to bottom.
I would agree. I mean, I'll tell you, I think I've probably soured on Bret over the last several years just because he's kind of turned into kind of grumpy old guy, right?
Yeah, he's easy not to like, for
right,
sure.
right. But you're right. I mean, if you look at the body of work from when he came up with Anvil Neidhart as the Hart Foundation and Jimmy Hart and the tag run that they went on, and then when you go and he started winning intercontinental titles and then world titles, and I mean, and you're right. I mean, some of the work that he did as a heel, as part of the quote Hart Foundation, it was the Canadian group against Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Yep.
I mean that was, and then Shawn Michaels and the screw job and this that. I mean,
Fantastic.
yeah, it was absolutely fantastic. So, okay, so I've got Stone Cold, Macho Man, Hogan, Flair, and Taker. You've got Stone Cold, Macho Man, Jake, Piper, and Bret Hart. Okay, so I'll put you on the spot. I'll put you on the spot here for 1 minute.
Please.
A single honorable mention. One more.
A single honorable mention.
And make it one that we haven't talked about. So make it somebody that's not on my list.
And surprisingly, I figured this guy would end up on your list, but I think The Rock is my honorable mention because unmatchable charisma, probably arguably more than Stone Cold, I think. Everyone's excited to see The Rock when he comes in. The single reason that he didn't end up on my list, the lamest finisher ever. Like
the elbow,
that rock bottom elbow bullshit is so dumb. It is so damn dumb. Like, I don't care how many times you jump over the guy and do the whole thing and just, it's an elbow drop, for God's sakes. Like, even Hogan's leg drop has a little bit more credibility than that. The elbow is just, it just killed me. It crushed me. But I don't think there's anybody that I would love to see more at an upcoming WrestleMania than someone like The Rock, because you and I both know, and we've giggled endless times listening to that guy roast people on the microphone, whether it's or all this stuff that he did, all the impressions he does and making fun of the NWO when they were a thing in the WWE. I mean, he's fantastic, and I love the guy. He's not a tactician in the same sense that any of the other guys are, but I mean, he's charisma absolutely 150% for that.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, that dude, yeah, I mean, he's just he kind of defined that kind of next wave of WWE. I think he's candidly, I think he's probably too big for wrestling at this point, right? I mean, he's a multi-billionaire when it comes to the movies. But I would agree. Rock is high on that list.
Is he your honorable mention though?
No,
he's putting me on the spot. I got to put you back on there.
He's not. Mine would actually be John Cena.
Okay, all right.
John Cena, that dude gets so much hate.
He's on the second coming of Hogan, is what he is.
Right. And for a lot of years he was going to be the next Hogan, right? But you know what? If you look at John Cena objectively at what he does in the ring, John Cena doesn't have bad matches. He really doesn't. I mean, yes, he uses the 5 moves of doom, and yes, he's very formulaic in his matches, but he can go in there and he can have a good match with just about anybody.
Yeah, for
he's
sure.
Entertaining on the mic. He literally gives 2 fucks about if he's getting roasted or cheered or what. He just doesn't care. And then when you factor in, all the stuff that he's done with Make-A-Wish and he's a funny actor. Like some of the movies that he's in, what was that movie with, what was the gal, the comedian, Amy, is it Schumer? Amy Schumer? He was in a movie with her. Yeah. He was funny. I mean, he didn't carry the movie or anything. He was there to be a meathead, and he's a meathead. But again, I know I get a lot of hate from, like, there's a lot of kind of wrestling fans our age that, want to hate on WWE and hate on anything that's quote mainstream, and anything that's not, New Japan or AEW or this, that, and the other thing is just garbage.
Right.
but John Cena, to me, he's an entertaining dude. And, I suppose that's consistent with my love for Hogan, right? John Cena is the next Hulk Hogan.
Very much, in my opinion, very much. He's more of a body than a wrestler, and has a lot of charisma and evokes a lot of emotion from the crowd. Cena more so negative, or maybe as much negative as positive. Hogan didn't get nearly as much negative, but that was at a different time, right? Like it wasn't popular to jeer the bad guy. It was more
pre-social
popular.
media too, right?
Yeah, exactly. So the business has changed immensely over the last 20 years. But I would agree that he deserves a lot of props for taking on a role very similar to Hogan, but at the same time, running. He understands that at the end of the day, whether they're cheering him or whether they're booing him, as long as they're doing one or the other, he's doing his job.
He's winning. Yeah.
He's making the company money, and he is therefore a very valuable asset. And I am, for one, am definitely sad to see him not a part of the company on a regular basis.
Yeah.
A lot of the last WrestleMania, which was a huge disappointment from my perspective, for him specifically. But good for him. Good for everything he's done for that company, and I hope that his run is not done, because he's pretty close to Flair in titles, right? If I'm not mistaken.
He's tied. They both have 16 titles. I've got to think that Vince is not going to let him. Yeah, he's gonna get 17. I gotta think.
Maybe just maybe. Yeah. Give him a 1 or 2 year run with somebody.
Yeah.
And let him do it. Let him prove it one more time. Probably after Flair's dead, right? Because Flair would cry, because Flair's kind of a crier.
That's what Flair does. He cries.
He cries. So,
all right. Well, hey, we knocked out our top 5. We broke through the barrier of getting together and doing our first podcast, right? So we did it, and now we know that we can do it. So I can pretty much guarantee you that this will not be the last time that old Pip is on the podcast here. So which makes me immensely happy, because if we can schedule some time to get together on Zoom and chat bullshit about the way we, shit that we've been talking about for the last 20, 30 years now, that makes me very happy. So.
Yes, me too. And thank you for having me on with all of your 406 viewers. I don't want to brag, but I'm pretty sure this will double, if not quadruple, your viewership. And hopefully it does. I don't know if anyone's going to sit through 45 minutes of wrestling conversation, but fingers crossed it happens. And if it doesn't, who gives a shit? Like, this is kind of what we're here for. It's just to talk between us. So, hopefully many more much more content to come in terms of all of our favorites.
Absolutely. A couple things that we've been talking about in terms of kind of upcoming and next things that we may talk about. Pip and I are both huge Van Halen fans, right? So we have to have probably one or several discussions about Van Halen. We are obviously huge wrestling fans. We are huge horror movie fans. We might have a conversation about Police Academy movies. Who knows?
Big Trouble in Little China. The greatest 80s movies that nobody ever cared about.
There you go. So hey, again, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening to us bullshit. I'm Chewie. Have a good evening.
I'm Pip, and love you, buddy.
All right, love you too, man. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. See ya.
All right.